Meet Melody Baker, a successful lawyer caught in a web of deceit. When an alluring client tempts her to betray her vows, she faces the ultimate test of loyalty. Will Baker, her husband, discovers the affair and sets a trap, leading to a confrontation that spirals out of control. Explosive revelations, dangerous alliances, and a shocking twist will leave you breathless. Witness the emotional turmoil and the fight for redemption. Melody Baker was a lawyer, a mother of 2 teens, and the wife of Will Baker, her true love. At 42, she was a very attractive woman with dark hair, dark eyes, a slim body, and a great smile. She was also smart and understood people well. But now, as she sat at the banquet table, her marriage and family were in serious trouble, and it was all because of her. Her husband, Will, and her client, Robert Dawson, were glaring at each other with hatred. The conflict was because of her. Robert wanted to spend the weekend with her and leave Will with his companion, the young and beautiful Gina. Before seeing and hearing Will's reaction to Robert's proposal, she had been looking forward to a break from her marriage. It seemed easy. Robert Dawson was incredibly attractive to her, enough that she was willing to let Will be with Gina. This situation started a few months ago when Robert was sued by a big bank. He came to their firm for help, and they assigned her to his case. They worked on the case together with others from his company and hers. But Mel and Robert became closer. They started having dinners alone and talking about personal things. They stayed late for meetings, sharing more about their lives. Mel knew she was in danger of breaking her marriage vows because of her attraction to Robert. He was single and known to be a skilled lover. His company vice president, Gloria, even said so. Robert was taller, more handsome, and smoother than Will, who still had some rough edges from his upbringing. After some late-night meetings, she knew she wanted to try being with Robert. The work on the case intensified with settlement offers and extensive evidence requests. As the case escalated, so did Mel and Robert's relationship. Now he openly pursued her when they were alone. She allowed him a kiss or a hug, but resisted going further. Despite her strong desire, she didn't want to cheat on Will. She knew what she wanted, but didn't know how to get it without ruining her life. One evening during a late meeting, Robert suggested they go to his hotel room for a few hours. Mel immediately said no. She was tempted but not inclined to cheat on Will. It was about honesty and honor, but also because she knew Will would find out if she slept with Robert, and that would end her marriage. She told Robert this before they parted that evening. Then came their first real kiss, which confused her. After that, their relationship cooled a bit, but not for long. Negotiations for the case were close to completion. Mel tricked the other party by asking for more specific information, showing the case would be fully examined. The case was settled favorably for Robert. After signing the papers, Robert invited Mel to an early dinner to celebrate. His idea of celebration included losing their clothes. Mel said no, but it wasn't a firm no. As they walked to her car, Robert said, "I have a proposal." Mel smiled. "I know, and I just said no." Robert said, "I'll be honored at a charity dance next Friday in town. I'm inviting you and Will. I'll have a beautiful young woman with me. We've been close for a long time." Mel frowned. "What do you mean, Robert?" "At some point, I'll propose a trade to Will. He gets Gina, and I get you for the weekend." "Oh, God." Mel lost some confidence and calm. She was really embarrassed. "Do you think he'll agree?" Robert was all in. "No, maybe, not likely." He pulled her close and kissed her. "I'll send you an invitation. You and Will can sit at the main table with me and Gina. There will be dancing. Gina is a professional dancer. She'll be a great partner for Will." Mel said, "We'd be happy to come to dinner. As for sharing, don't do anything until we discuss it further. Maybe after we see how dinner goes." "Okay, but Mel, if we do this, you'll have a great time." She got into her car and drove away, knowing Robert was right. That evening, she told Will about the case settlement and the dance. Will asked, "Does this mean Robert is coming home?" Will's radar was on high alert, but he didn't say more. Will was a writer of thrillers, detective stories, short stories, serious fiction, and recently, a sci-fi book. He wasn't famous, but made good money, more than Mel's salary at the law firm. He worked mainly from home, close to their 2 children, Sherry, 17, and Mark, 15. He had been a stay-at-home dad since they were little. Sometimes he traveled to promote his books or recently to consult on a movie based on his latest thriller, Danger Man. But mostly he wrote at home, a fast and confident writer who rarely needed to rewrite. He could do this because he was thoughtful and detailed in his descriptions. Will could replay scenes in his head like a video, with sound and pictures, and then write them down. This ability bothered Mel when she turned down Robert's offer. Will never turned off this analytical look even on her and the kids. Often he noticed things about the kids that helped prevent problems. The kids thought Will was a magician, knowing they couldn't hide anything important from him. Mel knew it too. The banquet for Robert was a fancy event in a nice place downtown. The kids went to Mel's parents for the weekend, leaving the weekend free for whatever her parents could come up with. Mel felt nervous when they arrived. She wanted what she wanted, but was unsure about the proposed exchange. That uncertainty lessened when she saw Gina, who looked like a dream. Mel noticed Will's glances at Gina during the introduction by Robert. This made her feel jealous and insecure. Maybe letting Will be with Gina wasn't a good idea. This thought distracted her from fully considering whether Will would agree to the exchange. She skipped this review when jealousy took over. The four of them ate, drank, and talked at the head table with Robert's vice president, Gloria, and her husband, Rick. Dinner went well, and Robert received his award with some speeches. His speech was a small masterpiece, mixing modesty with sly self-congratulation. He received applause and returned to the table. Will congratulated him, as did the others. The band started playing, and after a few songs, Robert led Mel to the dance floor. Mel was captivated by Robert, more so now. He was so smooth, and dancing with him, she realized how strong and athletic he was. She also noticed how excited he was about dancing with her. Mel didn't see Will and Gina still at the table. Robert whispered to her as they began their second dance. "Are we agreed?" "I can propose after this song," Mel said. "Yes, do it." She was beyond worried that Gina would steal her man. When they returned to the table, Mel noticed Will and Gina didn't seem to be moving. Robert asked Will about it, and Will said he watched them dance. He looked straight at Mel. Mel was ready to call Robert off, but he said, "Will, Mel and I have been working closely together these past months. I hope she and I can spend the weekend together. You and Gina might too." Mel looked at her husband, but he only looked at Robert. There was a long pause. Then Will said, "No." This was a decisive refusal. No explanation, but very definite. Mel's hope for a weekend with Robert was dashed. She knew this tone of her husband. She was ready to warn Robert, but Robert insisted, "Maybe you should ask Mel." Will's response was quick and alarming. "I'm not going to ask her, Robert. Our marriage is on the rocks right now." Mel could easily push him over the edge with the wrong answer. That would be a shame. "We have kids in high school," Robert said. "Well, I'll ask her. Mel, will you accept my offer?" Mel looked at Will. There were no concessions. She knew she was in big trouble. She stood up, refused Robert, and took Will's hand as they left. Will and Mel were silent during the ride home. Mel was scared and on the verge of tears. She knew Will was aware of the intrigue, the scheme she and Robert had tried to arrange at the dance. Will had clearly avoided making her say she supported the trade too early. But Mel knew Will was aware she wanted this, and she feared that realization could destroy them. It was a cynical attempt on her part to be with another man. The silence continued as they entered the house. Will went upstairs and took a shower. Mel sat in the kitchen feeling dizzy. She looked around the house where they had been so happy raising their family. After a while, Mel thought about the evening. She thought about how Will had avoided making her say she wanted the exchange. Maybe this was his way of stopping their long slide toward divorce. If she said it, it couldn't be ignored. Although they both knew she wanted the exchange, it wasn't right on the table to see and discuss. She had no acceptable excuses, and the truth would be painful. She heard the shower stop. She waited, then went upstairs. Will was wearing sweatpants and sneakers. He glanced at her. "I'm going to go for a run. I don't know why I took a shower." He slowly walked down the stairs and left. Will's apathetic behavior alarmed Mel. He wasn't as calm about what happened at the dance as he seemed. She took a shower and waited for him to return. It took an hour. She sat in a chair by the bed, trying to read a book on her Kindle. It was useless. The run calmed Will down. He avoided directly acknowledging Mel's desire for Robert and her willingness to act on it. If she had spoken in favor of the proposed exchange, he might have left her alone at dinner and maybe forever. This was something he couldn't stand. Mel should have known this after 20 years. He felt she knew it, but she continued anyway. His efforts to prevent her from openly disrespecting him had left the situation in a precarious state. He decided to leave everything as it was and see what happened next. He thought it would be nice to have some explanation for her behavior, but he didn't really need it. She was so consumed by passion for this guy that she lost her bearings. Maybe they should go to counseling. What would happen if she didn't bring it up herself? Will decided to give her time to think, but he also planned to start following her and her client. When he returned from his run, Mel was reading in the bedroom. Will came in, turned off the downstairs light, and went up to the bedroom. He undressed, took another shower, and came out clean and silent. He put on his boxers and t-shirt and got into bed without a word. Soon, Mel turned off the light and also went to bed. She didn't know whether to start a conversation and decided not to. She finally fell asleep several hours later. Will got up early on Saturday morning. He drove to his mom's house to pick up the kids and bought them breakfast at Denny's. His eldest, Sherry, asked, "Where's Mommy?" Will's short answer was, "She didn't sleep well." Mark, his 15-year-old son, asked, "How was the dinner dance?" Will replied, "The music was okay, and so was the food." Both children saw he was in a bad mood and changed the topic to schoolwork. The drive home was fine because Will relaxed a little, but his teenagers were cautious when they arrived home. Mel woke up and found that Will was not home. No note. She assumed he had gone to pick up the children. As she came downstairs, dressed, the three entered through the front door. She watched everyone carefully to see if Will had discussed the problem with Robert. They weren't as happy as usual, but weren't upset either. So no. An awkward calm settled over the house. Sherry and Mark were both gone for the day. Will busied himself with housework and Mel pretended to read. There was not a word between them. At dinner, they only said, "Please pass the salt." When it was bedtime for the adults, Will went for a run again. He returned, took a shower, and went to bed, barely speaking to Mel. She asked him, "Did you have a good run?" He replied, "Yes," then rolled over to sleep. On Sunday morning, Mel tried to cuddle with Will, but he stood up as soon as she did. He quickly got dressed and went downstairs. The children both left and didn't return. As they were leaving, Sherry asked Mark, "What do you think is going on?" "I don't know. Something about that dance party," Mark replied. "Yes, Mom must have done something," Sherry said. "Wasn't it a dinner for Mom's big client?" Mark asked. "Yes, but it's no use guessing. If this continues, we can ask them." "Yeah, maybe not," Sherry thought. "This might ruin everything." They each went their separate ways. Mel cooked Sunday dinner, lasagna and cucumber salad. Both children had seconds, but Will barely touched his portion, leaving a lot on the plate. This was very unusual for him. He just wasn't hungry, and when he wasn't hungry, he didn't eat. He watched a football match in the evening until late. Mel pretended to be asleep when he came upstairs. On Monday morning, after everyone had left for school and work, Will called his friend Mason Dabney, who was the manager at the hotel where the dinner was held and where Robert Dawson was staying. The two had known each other since school and sometimes met for a beer. After some greetings, Will asked Mason if Robert Dawson was still staying at the hotel. The answer was that he was booked for one more night and then would leave. Mel's commute to work was stressful. Her tension was compounded by the fact that she had one last meeting scheduled with Robert and his vice president, Gloria. The meeting was supposed to wrap up everything at 10 o'clock in the morning. Mel led them into the conference room. They discussed the details of the agreement and closed the issue. It took 20 minutes. Robert then asked, "Mel, are you okay after the dance?" Mel looked at Gloria. Robert said, "She was there." Mel replied, No, maybe I'm not okay. My actions might cost me a lot." Robert frowned. "But nothing happened. He said no, and you left. He knew that I wanted it. Since then, he hasn't said 10 words to me, hasn't touched me at all." Mel looked stoic. Robert said, "He's stupid if he gives up on you because of this. Even if we did that, he'd still be stupid to give up on you. Please call me." "I don't want him to give up on me," Mel said. She shook hands with them and left the room. Gloria looked at Robert and said, So, just the two of us for the evening? He nodded. I sent Gina away. Looks like Rick will be lonely again. Gloria smiled. Yes, I'll make it up to him later. He gets so excited. Mel found it difficult to work that day. She gave up and went home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Will was at home working hard on his computer. She looked in at him and then stood at the door. He didn't look up after the first glance. He seemed to finish what he was writing and looked at her. I'm broke. I couldn't work. Whose fault is this? Mostly mine. I admit I was afraid to say anything, but I need to apologize and find out where we are. The kids are worried. I'm worried, she said. Is your friend Robert still in town? Yes, we had a short meeting this morning. I believe he is leaving tomorrow. He's a cocky idiot full of himself, and you should have been full of him too. Mel spoke in a quiet voice. I said no when he suggested it. He convinced me that maybe you'd agree with Gina. I should have known better. There was a long silence. Finally, Mel spoke. What can I do, Will? I'm not sure. Nothing specific comes to mind, he said. Everyone has their weak moments, Will, she said. He nodded. Mel knelt down in front of him. He was wearing his usual sports shorts and a t-shirt. He didn't resist when she pulled his shorts down. She pushed him onto the sofa across the room. Afterward, they lay on the sofa for some time. Then she got up and left the room. Dinner was reheated lasagna. Mel was in a much better mood. The children noticed something was off when they came home. Will hadn't come out of his office yet. Mel sent Mark to get him at 6:30. Mark knocked on the door and said, "Dinner." Will came down to the kitchen. Mel watched him closely as he entered. She was surprised he didn't come earlier. The children watched too. Will smiled at all of them and sat down to eat. He asked the children about school and talked to Mel about cleaning out the garage. The whole dinner felt more normal than anything had in days. The day ended with the kids going to their rooms and Mel and Will cleaning up. Will turned to her and said, "Sex is good, but it's not enough. I understand that this guy was hot. There have been a lot of hot guys in your life. Some are probably much hotter than him. Why now? We worked together for months. He worked on me for months. It built up. He wasn't subtle in the end. And by then, I was weak in front of him. I'm surprised you didn't go with him." She froze. Me too. I really wanted this, Will, but it shocks me. Makes me feel second-rate. Mel smiled at him. You're a wonderful husband, a fantastic father. You're not second-rate. You're the best, Will. Just not the best when it comes to sex. Will said, Gina could rock your world. It doesn't mean we're the only desirable people in the world. The thing is, you're the only woman I want in the world. She seemed happy when he said this, but then he added, But I'm not that for you. I'm your long-term choice, and that guy was your short-term choice. She didn't deny it. Well, I'll never know about him. He'd probably be a loser. I'll never know about any other guy. But you? Will nodded. He got up and went to the bedroom. Mel realized she had a big job ahead of her. What Will said was true. She had wanted Robert more than Will on the night of the party, maybe even now. Over the next few months, Mel worked hard to show Will that he was her one and only, but things didn't go as she hoped. They had sex, sometimes really good sex, but sometimes Will seemed distracted. Mel was getting more irritated by this. Their relationship never went back to how it was before the trade proposal. Mel knew this, and so did Will. One evening, Will sat alone at home, trying to figure out the problem. From a distance, what Mel did didn't seem so bad. She craved a man who was attractive. She hadn't changed, but she wanted this guy so much she was willing to risk her family. No matter how he looked at it, his wife wanting another man more than him was the deciding factor. What he told her was true. There was no other woman who made him feel the same way. He had met some very attractive women, like the blonde divorcee from their street, but he never even came close to cheating. He was strict about it, but he felt he would now and forever be the second choice for his own wife. This thought tormented him. He wondered if she thought about Robert when they had sex. He assumed so, but put it aside. He decided he had to stay with her for the sake of their children, even though they were older. He had to hold out for a while. He still got regular sex and company from Mel. About 8 months after the banquet, Robert was due to come back. He was involved in another legal dispute, this time over a chemical patent. Mel was a chemistry major in college. It was her specialty, and she had a past relationship with Robert. One morning, the three main partners of her firm called her, and Robert was there. She thought, "This is the last thing I need." The three bosses were Abe, Robert Benson, and Caleb Carlton. Abe knew her best and knew about the problems she had with Robert and Will due to the previous case. After some tense greetings, Abe said, "Mel, we know about some difficulties for you, but Robert has serious business and asked you to handle it. This is a challenge to a chemical patent. You have the technical knowledge and he knows you." Mel said, "Abe, I can't do this. I have a family. I want to keep it." Robert entered the conversation. "Mel, what happened before won't happen again. I promise." Mel shook her head. "Even if I believed you, Will would see it differently." Bart intervened. "Mel, this is a big deal for the firm and for Robert. Millions are on the line. You need to be strong. I'm sure Will understand." Mel looked at him. "No, it's too much of a risk for me," Caleb said. "It's a huge risk to abandon us. Will needs to trust you. We're all adults, and Robert has assured us he will refrain from any advances." Mel said, "Will and I don't need my money. Still, I'll ask him about it." Robert said, "If he objects, I can talk to him. Last time was good, but nothing really happened. I won't insist. I'm in trouble here." Mel was a ball of nerves that evening. She knew she had to wait until later to discuss this with Will. Will saw it when they were alone in the TV room. He asked, "What's the matter?" Mel said, "Robert has a new business issue. They want me to handle it. It's a chemical patent." "And you said?" "I said no, but they insist it would cost me my job if I refuse." Will said, "You know, a bachelor's degree in chemistry doesn't mean that much. You'll still have to hire experts, right? They'll advise you all," Will said. "Yes, but Robert is educated in chemistry. He insisted on me being on the team because he wouldn't have to pay someone else to understand him," Mel replied. "He insisted on you because you're unfinished business to him. His ego is hurt. He will go after you." "No, I mean maybe, but he has a good non-sexual reason for me to lead our team. He says he won't act like he used to. He has a lot at stake, so do I." "Mel, you don't believe me?" "It doesn't matter if he tries. I won't let it happen." Will sat quietly for a while, then shrugged. "How much contact with him will this case involve?" "He and Gloria have rented an apartment near the office. They'll be here for at least 6 weeks." Will looked at her. "I'll leave it up to you. Maybe this is a chance to show me who's really number one. You know what's at stake." Mel nodded. "I know." Will got up and went to bed. Mel followed him a few minutes later. They settled into bed and Mel stroked Will's stomach. "I need a dose of love," she said. He gave it to her. It started slow but quickly picked up speed and ended very well. Afterwards, they lay next to each other. Mel said, "Thank you." "There's nothing to be thankful for. It was a pleasure." They slept well. The next day, Mel decided to take over Robert's case. He and Gloria attended a series of all-day meetings. Mel was assigned 2 assistants for the case, but neither had a background in chemistry. The next day saw more intense meetings. They hired 2 experts to assess the situation. The meetings continued late into the night, with dinner delivered to the office. Every night, Mel came home between 9:30 and 10, exhausted. When they were in bed after the second night of work, Will asked, "Were there any problems?" "No, just too much to do, and he has Gloria. Her husband doesn't seem to mind." "I think she told me it turned him on. She tried to convince me about you and Robert. I put her in her place. I really don't understand all this nonsense." "Gloria owns it. That's what she told me. There's no way I would want a marriage like that." "You don't have to worry about it. That's not what's bothering me. I will tell you if I sense any danger and we can talk, but I don't think that's going to happen." The intensity of work decreased after the first 2 days. Mel assigned her team to basic legal research. Robert and Mel then held various discussions with their experts. After 2 weeks, Mel was pretty sure Robert wouldn't be a problem. She told Will about this, but he wasn't convinced. Every evening when she came home, he watched her carefully. They got along better in bed, with more effort on her part leading to more effort on his part. But Will still wasn't convinced. Mel's efforts gave him some doubts. She spent more time with Robert than with Will, but he was sure she hadn't started a sexual relationship with Robert yet. He thought it might happen at some point. She wanted it again. There was something about how they worked together that caused her reaction last time. There was also some special attraction between them. Now she had been warned. He thought it might take her by surprise, and that would be a shame. One evening, about 4 weeks into the case, Robert returned from a business trip to Pittsburgh. That day, Mel came home on fire. The children were at a neighbor's for dinner. Mel took one look at Will and dragged him into the bedroom. She was like a volcano. It lasted a long time because they made it last. It was difficult, but worth it. Both lay exhausted. Will turned to Mel. "I guess I can thank Robert for that." Mel sighed. "Yes. What are you going to do?" "What have you done?" "Didn't do anything. He didn't really try. Not openly." "Explain." "I mean, he didn't insist. But small touches, indirectly suggestive comments. Kisses and hugs? No. Damn it. I guess I should be grateful that you brought this home." "Yes. How long?" "I admit this is becoming a risk. I must complete this part of the matter, training the experts." "I really don't understand this situation. He's not more attractive than other guys who have courted you." "Not for me. It's you and him." Pause. "That is you and him." Will rolled over, trying to sleep. Not so easy. Mel immediately fell asleep. In the morning, Will stopped Mel on her way out the door to work. "If you give up, if he tries and wins, he's a dead man. It doesn't matter how rich he is. Tell him." Mel was shocked. Will looked at her with a firm gaze. She was speechless. He patted her on the cheek. "So you both know what's at stake. I'll serve the time if I have to." Then he turned back into the house. He sat down to breakfast and finished his eggs. He walked the children to school and sat down to write. He had a plan of sorts. He hoped he wouldn't have to use it. He patted her cheek. "So you both know what's at stake. I'll serve the time if I have to." Then he turned back into the house. He sat down, finished his breakfast, walked the children to school, and sat down to plan. He hoped he wouldn't have to use it. Mel drove to work, mildly shocked. She tried to convince herself that Will's threat wasn't serious, but she knew he meant it. She needed to finish the next 2 weeks with Robert before handing the case to other lawyers without any issues. At the office, she drank coffee and reviewed the latest materials from the experts. Robert and Gloria arrived at 10 with Jonathan Crisp, one of the expert chemists. They gathered in the large conference room for the case. After an hour, they took a break. Mel went to her office, but Robert followed and closed the door. "What's happening to you?" he asked. "Will is very worried about this situation. I told him you aren't proposing to me," she said. "Well, that's mostly true." "That's not true at all, Robert. You're just dancing around the edges. But I know your purpose." Robert smiled. "We have chemistry." She laughed, but it wasn't funny. "Yes, I know. Yesterday I almost killed poor Will as soon as I got home. He should be grateful. Better sex through chemistry." Robert smirked. Mel said, "He won't kill me, Robert. Just you. Is it worth dying for?" Robert froze. "Maybe it's worth it. Will has his own inner demons. Rage, slow but sure. He meant what he said, and he's capable of getting away with it." At that moment, Gloria knocked, and they returned to their meeting. Will didn't know if his threat would work. He meant it in an abstract sense. He knew that if Robert slept with Mel, he would hurt him and possibly divorce her. Watching her vulnerability with Robert was strange. She had never been so sexually attracted to anyone else. Maybe it wasn't her fault. She seemed overwhelmed by her desire for Robert. Will decided that if his threat didn't work, he wouldn't kill or maim Robert. But he was done being his wife's second choice. If they completed the case without incident and Robert left, he wasn't sure he could continue the marriage. If Mel gave in, he would never touch her again. When Mel came home on time that evening, the family had dinner together prepared by Will. Mel was relieved that Will seemed calm. They watched a basketball game and went to bed. Will asked, "How was your day? Did you talk to Robert?" "I told him your attitude toward him. After that, there were no problems." "Okay, but it's all on you. Regardless of what I say, he'll probably continue. Once he leaves, we'll see." "What do you mean?" "We'll see if he's not next to me. He won't be a problem." Will looked at her seriously. "I feel like reheated leftovers and he feels like a 5-star dish." She laughed. "I'm not a gourmet. I like your cooking even if it's leftovers." She rushed at him and sat on his chest. He tried to resist, but it was futile, although it was nice to be swept away by her. For her part, Mel had loved their sex since the Robert thing arose. That night, she took Will, imagining she was with Robert. They both knew what she really wanted, and both were concerned. Will felt left out. Mel was afraid for her future. They never got past the trade proposal. She never lied to Will about how he was only second in her desires. She consoled him by having sex when he seemed depressed about it. The next few days at work were very stressful for Mel. They prepared for the experts. With expert reports from the other side, Mel worked all day Saturday as Jonathan Crisp prepared for next week's trial in Washington. He was scheduled to fly to Spokane on Sunday. He had a room in nearby Wayne Sap on the Columbia River. The team of chemical experts finished their work by Thursday morning. From now until the trial in Pittsburgh, Mel and Robert could work by phone or Skype if necessary. Over the week, Robert subtly ramped up his seduction campaign despite Mel's warning. Mel was on guard, but the techniques excited her, and she brought it home. Will noticed Mel's growing passion, as did the children. One morning at breakfast, Sherry said, "You're keeping us up late at night." Mel replied, "We'll get you some noise suppressors." Mark added, "I already use them, but they are uncomfortable." Mel said, "Earplugs. It's not our fault, really." They left it at that. Robert invited Mel to lunch on Thursday. He flew to Pittsburgh on Friday morning for a preliminary hearing next week in U.S. District Court. Mel didn't need to be present. Robert took Mel to a nice restaurant near his apartment. Neither Gloria nor anyone else from the team was there. Mel expected this. She knew Robert would try to launch a full-scale attack. Normally, she would prioritize caution over risk, but she knew she would have to participate in a trial in Pittsburgh. A trial date had not yet been set, but it would be determined at the hearing. Mel would have to be in Pittsburgh for 2 weeks, possibly including weekends. She had to decide whether to stay on the case or quit. She saw this lunch as a test. Lunch was mostly pleasant. Robert made it clear he wanted to eat and then go to his apartment for dessert. Mel politely refused. They ate. The food was good, and Mel had a glass of wine. Just one. Robert slid closer to Mel and hugged her. Mel didn't move away. Robert ran his hand over her cheek. Mel looked him straight in the eyes. Never in her life had she wanted something so much and given up on it. For the first time, she slid out from under the bench, panting. "No," she said. Robert was disappointed. "Not yet," he said, waving for the bill. Mel went home. She found Will and said, "He's gone. I need you." They spent the evening in bed and other places until the kids got home a little after 4. Mel felt like she had dodged a bullet. The following week, a judge in Pittsburgh set the trial for mid-June, 5 months away. Mel thought it over and had a meeting with the 3 partners about the case. She began by saying she would not travel to Pittsburgh for the trial. Abe asked, "Why? You did a great job preparing. I'm guessing it's because of your husband's concerns, but nothing happened, right?" "True, but it was here, when I came home every night. In Pittsburgh, I'd be on his turf, and Will would be here." Caleb said, "Why don't you just, do it? I mean, if you were in Pennsylvania, who would know? I would know, so Will would know. Maybe not right away, but soon enough." Abe said, "We sympathize, but I think we have to persist." Mel smiled. "Try to find someone." She got up and left the room. As she left, Abe said, "She's got us stumped. At least we have time. Maybe we can arrange for her to counsel, maybe advise from here." Caleb said, "She's weak. I don't like being weak. Let's see if we can find someone as a sideline hire." That's what they tried to do over the following weeks. They interviewed 4 candidates, but none were suitable. They made an offer to a guy from a big New York firm, but he refused. Mel trained one of her assistants, Martin Blaine, to cross-examine opposing experts and present their own. Meanwhile, Mel discussed the issue with Will. He expected this. He knew there would have to be a trial if the case was not settled. Mel said one night, "There's probably going to be a trial in Pittsburgh this year. They want me there." "And you said no." "They're looking for a replacement, so far without success, and time is running out. If I insist, they'll probably fire me. Use the insubordination clause. You'll find something else. Maybe we'll write a book together, a novel with elements of romance, where the marriage is in jeopardy." She started laughing. Scarlett looking at Rhett, who is shirtless. She's moving towards him. Is that what you mean? He laughed. Maybe with new names. I wonder if Scarlett will give in. Of course she will. This is fiction. We have to sell the book. What about you? Would you give up if you were there in smoky Pittsburgh? There's no smoke there anymore. I'm not going to lie, Will. It's entirely possible. But the lawsuit is intense. Maybe this will solve the problem, but probably not, right? I feel like I'm just some leftover. Well, Will, I'm not going. So that's it. I'm training Marty to handle the trial. He's smart. He and I can consult every evening on Skype. I'll have transcripts in the evening. Will said, I think you'll always feel sorry for me and blame me. That's not a good basis for continuing a relationship. Mel said, I love you. Only you. That's enough. That night, the two of them burned in the sheets. The children used earplugs, but they didn't help much. As the trial approached, Mel spent more time at work. Sherry graduated from high school and had been accepted to Bethlehem College, 2 hours away from home. She and Will were busy preparing for her studies. Will tried to stay strong, even though it was hard for him. On June 1st, 10 days before the trial, Marty Blaine was hospitalized in Pittsburgh with heart disease. Doctors explained his problem as the result of severe stress. He was banned from further participation in the trial. Mel's firm asked the judge to postpone the date, but this was rejected. The judge said, ABC is a large firm with many lawyers. She knew that Mel had been involved in the interviews and preparations and was a senior lawyer. When they returned from the trial, the team broke the news. At that time, Mel was sitting in her office with Will. He relayed the news to her and said, There's no choice now. While I feel bad for Marty, I think you're better off for us. I've booked you a room at the Westin next to the court. Mel nodded. She knew she had little choice. If she resigned, she could still face disciplinary action by the bar. Caleb had connections there. She went home to pack her things and try to calm Will down. She did her best. Will helped her load the car and check the tires and oil. He then waved to her as she left for Pittsburgh. As he walked back to the house, he estimated the chances of her faithfulness to be 50-50 at best. He made some preparations just in case. In a way, he thought it would be a relief if she was unfaithful. Since the exchange proposal, their marriage had been declining. Lots of sex, fueled by her passion for another man. But before the banquet, they were very close in many ways. They discussed their work, children, vacation plans, and other everyday things. They were interested in each other. Not so much lately. He missed this. He didn't know if it could be fixed or if it was lost forever. Later that day, he explained the court emergency to Mark and Sherry. Sherry's graduation ceremony was scheduled for Friday. The Pittsburgh judge held trials 4 days a week and reserved Fridays for other business. It was the so-called garbage day, so maybe Mel could return for the ceremony. Will doubted it. Every evening, Mel called home to talk to Will and the kids. The calls usually came after 8 because she was so busy. Jury selection was set for the following Monday. Over the weekend, Mel called in the mornings. The rest of her time was spent with jury selection consultants. Around 8 o'clock on Sunday, Will asked her how things were going with Robert. No problem, Will. I'm just too busy, and so is he. Is he involved in the preparations? Yes, I'd say he's involved, but Will didn't find it funny, and Mel regretted making a joke. She said, Sorry, there's nothing going on. We work in the common room at the hotel. I sleep on the floor above, and he goes to his apartment. No offers. Dinner is room service. The jury was selected Monday, and opening statements were made. Mel didn't perform then, Jill Blanton did, with diagrams and exhibits prepared. On Tuesday, the plaintiff began presenting his case through experts. The first one took all day. Mel conducted a slow, step-by-step cross-examination and made many good points. At the end of the day, she was satisfied but returned to the family room to prepare for the next witness. She expected Robert to be there, and he was. When Mel returned to the room, Robert was happy and excited about his day in court. As Mel dropped off her business bags, Robert pulled her into a big hug and spun her around. Whoa, big boy, don't celebrate until we win, she said. You were wonderful, Mel. Just fantastic. Thanks. Now I need to eat, get ready, and try to get a good night's sleep. Robert didn't make any moves on her, but he said, When we win this case, I will take you to my place and make you so happy." Mel shook her head and began reading her notes for the next witness. She ate, then went to her room and slept. Wednesday went even better than the first day. Mel methodically worked through the plaintiff's case using their own expert. The guy resisted to the end, but it was a losing battle for him. This testimony was followed by 2 brief witnesses. The plaintiff concluded, and the judge denied the defendant's motion for judgment. When Mel returned to the room, Robert was there again, and no one else was. Her experts were due to arrive at 7 for the final run-through. Robert walked slowly toward Mel. This time his hug was soft and sensual, and he kissed her. She reciprocated his feelings. Just as things were about to heat up even more, the door opened, and Jill Blanton walked in. As Mel and Robert separated, the dinner delivery arrived. Robert left, and Mel briefly prepared both witnesses. At 10, she went to her room. The next morning, when the team arrived at court, Herman Billings, the plaintiff's lead attorney, asked to see them. Robert, Jill, and Mel entered the waiting room with him and the main client, CEO Morgan Thompson. Thompson wanted to settle. Billings offered a proposal. Jill immediately made a counteroffer she had worked on for a week. There were several rounds of negotiation, but ABC had Robert in a strong position. By 11 o'clock, an agreement was reached, very favorable to Robert. The parties drafted it and went to court. The agreement was filed, and the jury was sent home. That afternoon, some details were decided, and everyone was free. Mel was exhausted. She returned to her hotel room and slept for an hour. Then she got up and took a shower. Robert invited everyone to dinner at a club near his condo. Limousines were ordered for everyone. Mel called Will with the news. She promised to leave Pittsburgh on Friday afternoon but would miss the morning graduation ceremony. Will was not happy about this. The dinner arrangements also didn't please him. He said, "This is probably when you're most vulnerable." "I know, Will. I can handle it." "Okay, congratulations. Don't have too much fun." The club was a place for dinner and dancing. They were a party of 6, Robert, Mel, Jill, Jonathan Crisp, and 2 other ABC lawyers, Ellie Mason and Mike Delia. They were taken in a limousine, and Robert met them at their table. The food was great, as was the wine. The dancing started at 9. Robert immediately invited Mel. She had some wine with dinner and agreed to dance with him, though she thought to herself that dancing had started her marital problems. Jill and Jonathan danced too, as did Ellie and Mike. The other 2 pairs sometimes switched partners, but Robert and Mel danced 6 dances in a row, some fast, some slow. The slow dance at the end put Mel in a difficult position. She later recalled thinking she was 4 hours away from home and Will wouldn't be able to find out. Robert whispered to her as they danced, "Now we're going to my place. It's now or never. You're going to have the time of your life." Mel said, "Just this once, Robert. No one needs to know." Robert thought she wanted him so badly that she simply forgot about the 3 lawyers from her firm who knew very well what was going on. She allowed Robert to lead her out of the club and across the street to his condo. As they walked through the door, Robert turned her towards him and pressed her against the wall. He started with a deep kiss, which she returned. Robert took her hand and led her into the bedroom, where the bed was already made in anticipation. He turned her back to him and unbuttoned the top of her dress. He tossed it to the floor, leaving her in just her shoes, panties, and sheer bra. Then he took off her bra and started caressing her. She moaned. Nothing could stop it. When it was over, she snuggled up to him. Minutes passed. Robert said, "I've never experienced anything like this, Mel. Never." She heard something. Then she said, "Me too. Maybe no one ever." An hour later, they made love again. When they finished this time, they showered and ate some shrimp, celery, and apple slices. Then they returned to bed and made love slowly, face to face, looking at each other. Mel found it eye-opening. In the morning, they were still face to face. She separated and went to his bathroom, found a new toothbrush, and brushed her teeth. Then she took a shower. She was hungry and tormented by guilt. "Thank you for the whole night. It was amazing, the best," she said. I should feel guilty, but no, it was so over the top. And the breakfast was great too. He took a shower while she got dressed. When he came out naked, she looked at him one last time. He was excited again. Then she left. She went to her hotel, checked out, and began heading back to Virginia. She loved Will and hoped he would never find out about last night. She reminded herself to talk to the other three about keeping quiet. Will was worried about Thursday night dinner. He imagined how badly it could end for him and the family. He called Mel's cell phone at 11. It went to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. At midnight, he called the hotel and asked to call her room. No answer. He did the same at 2:30, claiming it was an emergency. Still, no answer. He gave up and tried to sleep. The graduation ceremony went well. Sherry made a speech, not the first student, but Will and Mark were impressed. Will took them to lunch. Sherry went out partying and Mark went to a friend's house for the night. Will stayed home doing some errands. He had a training room in the basement with a heavy bag, elliptical machine, and bench press. There was also a small bathroom with a shower, a full-size refrigerator, and a kitchen sink. There was a small TV. He went to Walmart and bought a microwave and hot plate. He finished setting it all up when he heard a car in the driveway. He walked out the basement door into the backyard and up the outside stairs to the kitchen. Mel had just walked in through the front door. He heard her shout, "Honey, I'm home!" like Ricky Ricardo. This showed him how nervous she was. He turned to her as she entered the room. He was leaning on the sink. She entered with a smile, which disappeared when she saw his face. She sat down on a kitchen chair. "Damn," she said, emotionless. Humbly, he said, "I called your hotel room. The last time was at 2:30. Mel's hope of continuing the marriage ended at that moment. "It was just sex. No love, no love," she said, crying quietly. He fell silent. "It doesn't matter. Maybe the memories will keep you warm at night, or maybe he will, but not me. Never again." "I love you, Will. I always will." She stood up and went upstairs, picking up her suitcase along the way. Will headed back to the basement and finished his preparations to move in there for the next few months. He never returned upstairs that day, and she never came downstairs. He finished writing a chapter in a new novel about love. Then he thought about what the next book might be. He always received good royalties for his books, some of which were published under pseudonyms. He decided to write about his marriage and its end, a serious book that may take some time to write. He made a plan and turned off the computer. He called his parents and informed them that he would be getting a divorce. Let her tell her family herself, he thought. The children weren't home. Sherry had agreed to stay with her best friend after all the partying, but both were supposed to return home the next day, Saturday. Will had already made arrangements with a lawyer to get a divorce if necessary. Zelda Morrison came highly recommended. He called her office 10 minutes before closing, and she answered. "Hello, this is Will Baker. I'm afraid I really need an appointment." She said, "I'm so sorry to hear that. Let me see. I have time on Monday at 9 in the morning." "Great. Can I give you the details now?" "Of course. Do you want to act quickly?" "Yes, I want her to be notified at her law firm as soon as possible." "Okay, I'll open a case and write everything down." That's what she did. At the end of the conversation, she said, "I can quickly prepare a lawsuit. Alternative grounds include infidelity or a no-fault divorce agreement." He said, "Let's stick to the infidelity for now. I think she won't deny it." The proposed agreement called for Will to remain in the home with custody of Mark. Sherry was old enough to live independently without parental care. When Mark graduated from school, the house would either be sold or one spouse would buy out the other's share. When the children returned home at lunchtime on Saturday, Mel greeted them, and then Will came up from the basement. Both immediately realized something was wrong. The four of them sat down at the kitchen table where they had shared so many meals. Will said, "Your mom and I, well, we've come to the end of our marriage. We both still love you, but some things have happened." Mel was shocked. She hadn't had time to talk about all this with Will, and although she was well aware that the marriage was in deep crisis, the suddenness of Will's announcement stunned her. Both children turned to her. Sherry asked, "What did you do, Mom? Because of those sounds that we hear." Mel said, "I slept with a client in Pittsburgh one night Thursday." Mark looked at his father. "Are you divorcing, Mom?" Sherry asked. "Yes," Will replied. "Just because of one night?" Sherry asked again. "Yes, but there's more to it than just one night. That one night was hanging over me. Your mother knew it and did it anyway." Mel said, "It's hard." Will said, "Not really, but for now I'll be sleeping in the basement. I'll still work in my office. Maybe I'll cook. I don't know how that will work. There are details we need to discuss. I'm very sorry it came to this, but it did. There's no turning back." Mel left the table in tears. Both children turned to Will. He said, "She found it so important to be with this guy that she was ready to destroy the family. She fought it, but she lost. Even if she hadn't given in, once she met him, nothing was the same for us." Sherry asked, "What will she do? Will she live here?" "This all needs to be worked out. Sherry, I'm so sorry this happened on your special day, but I'm proud of you. And you, Mark." They stood up and shared a group hug. Mel never came down while the kids were upstairs. She ran upstairs, fell on the bed, and sobbed for a long time. How could she be so stupid and selfish? Her thoughts about sex with Robert seemed sour, like spoiled milk. Every time she thought about it, she felt nauseous. Eventually, she smelled dinner. It smelled like burgers. She was hungry but had no intention of going downstairs. Will wondered as he prepared dinner whether Mel would be attracted to the smell. He thought not. He and the kids ate coleslaw and cheeseburgers. Everyone cleaned up after dinner together, and the children went up to their rooms. They discussed the situation in Sherry's room but couldn't come to any decisions. At 10 o'clock, Will was sitting in the TV room waiting for Mel. She appeared and sat down opposite him. He turned off the baseball game and looked at her. "I'm sorry it all happened so quickly, but I didn't see the point in waiting. We're done. It's better to take the bandage off right away," he said. "Maybe we should wait a little." "It was just one night, Will. All these years and just one night. Mel, you were warned multiple times. Why should I think this would stop? You weren't even going to talk about it. Next time you might get away with it. Maybe you already have." "No, you know it's not fair. After the whole switching partners thing, I was living on the edge. I was depressed because you clearly wanted him more than me. So you went and did it. But it was a mistake, a stupid mistake. No, this was your chance at the ultimate pleasure. Maybe I would never have known. Tell me, was it as great as you thought it would be?" She didn't answer. She blushed and began to cry. "So I can never compare with him, and I will never try. Marriage is not just about sex. That's a big part of it. And for us, it's gone. So there's no marriage. I could make you happy. You made me happy too. But you still went to him. Now you can have him as much as you want, but not me. Your choice is made." He stood up and went to his new sleeping place. Mel sat in the chair, continued to cry, and then went to Sherry's room. She knocked and Sherry opened the door. Mel simply said, "I love you. I messed up, but I love you. I'm so sorry I missed prom." Sherry hugged her, but then said, "Mom, how could you do this to all of us? I don't understand." "Me too, actually." Mark left his room. "Where is Daddy?" "Down in my sanctuary. I apologize to Sherry. I apologize to you. I love you both. Never forget that." She hugged them both and went to her room to cry even more. Mark turned to Sherry. "At least we can sleep better." He went to his room. When Will went to the lawyer, she already had the documents ready to sign. He signed them, and they discussed how things could happen. She told him it might take longer if Mel resisted, and Mel was an outstanding attorney at an outstanding law firm. Will shrugged. Zelda said, "I feel like it's all happening too fast. What happened will shock you, but initial reactions are often thoughtless. I've seen this coming for months. I made it clear to her what would happen. She did it anyway, so it's happening now. I see no reason for a delay. The marriage is over." "Okay, I can file electronically now and deliver it this afternoon. Sign here." Mel was in her office at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. She accepted congratulations from everyone without showing any visible reactions. When Abe called her in before dinner, he asked, "What the hell, Mel? I mean, Jesus. I was weak to him, I told you all that. He had his way in the end and he won me over. Now I'll end up a lonely old woman." Abe said, "I doubt it. You'll find another guy. Look at you." "Not the one I love, Abe. Not Will. Give him time. Maybe he'll listen to reason." She nodded, but thought differently. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, her secretary brought a young man into her office and he handed her the documents. She felt dead inside. Finally, she called Maury Slotkin, the firm's family law specialist, and invited him to Abe's office. She gave each of them copies of the documents. Abe said, "Damn, that's fast." He already knew what was likely to happen. Maury read the documents. "If the factual allegations are true, this seems fair. I understand that Will was primarily a stay-at-home parent. Yes, mostly he works from home. You have 20 days to respond. Do you want to fight? Even if you do, he might get a divorce. Let me think. I need time. Mel went home early. Will was there writing in his office. She looked in and said, "I'm home. I received the documents." Fine. He didn't even look up from his work. Mel knew he was deliberately ignoring her, and she also knew he wasn't as calm as he pretended to be. She returned to the kitchen, thinking about all the time they had spent together and how well they knew each other. That's why she could read him. His shoulder twitched. She'd known this for years. The thought of losing such closeness was so depressing. She decided to drag out the process, hoping he might cool down a little and start missing her. That was all she could think of. Will couldn't work effectively after Mel returned home. He was nervous and couldn't write. Every time he thought about the situation, he imagined Mel naked with Robert, her legs wrapped around him, her face a picture of passionate delight. He decided he needed to do something. There was one thing. He researched it. Then Will went down to the kitchen and started preparing dinner. He made a dish with chicken, onions, and rice. Spicy. He liked this recipe. It smelled wonderful when it was cooking. Mel came in and sat down at the kitchen table. She watched, but did not speak. She saw Will's shoulder begin to twitch. After a few minutes, he turned to her and said, "Cooking is harder when you're here." "I'm sorry. I like the idea of returning to as normal a life as possible while all this is going on. Until Sherry leaves, we probably won't get a divorce. I think we could sign the papers. You shouldn't have any trouble finding a place." "I already have a place. Same place as always. I like it." There was a long pause. Will was chopping garlic with his back to Mel. Then she said, "I'll say this once and I won't say it again. I made a very big, stupid mistake. A weak moment. All this time and then right at the end, I messed everything up and ruined, well, everything. If I could relive it, I would never do it." Will said, "I won't be upstaged, Mel, and that's what you did. We've been together for so long. We know each other so well. Oh, I hate the idea of it all going away. I just hate it. And I hate myself for causing it. Hate." Tears. Will turned to look at her. Her tears were like a knife in his stomach. He slowly slid down the tabletop to the floor. It was real pain. He leaned his back against the stove and began to cry, but he did not approach his wife. After all, she was the one who had stuck that knife into him. Mel saw how much pain she had caused Will. She saw this clearly and up close. She walked around the table to him, knelt down and hugged him. She stroked his head, still crying. That's how Sherry found them when she walked in through the patio door. Will saw her first, then Mel. They both rose to their feet as Sherry began to cry. They approached her, acting as one without hesitation. They hugged Sherry, and they all swayed back and forth together. Some time passed, and Will said, "The onions are burning." He went to the stove. Mel and Sherry sat down at the table just as Mark entered. He saw enough to be confused, but sat down with Mel and Sherry. They watched as Will chopped up the chicken and tossed it into the pan, then seasoned it. It smelled delicious. Mel said, "Despite everything else, you are the best cook in the world." The children giggled nervously. Will turned around and nodded. 30 minutes, he said. The dinner, as usual, was well received. No one talked about the elephant in the room. After eating, everyone went to their rooms. Will cleaned up. This went on for weeks. Mel's attorney responded to the lawsuit and asked for a consultation, but the response did not deny the facts. Mark went to football camp for 2 weeks. Sherry worked as a counselor at a nature camp in West Virginia, which left Mel and Will alone. Will was still cooking. Both worked, but there was almost no other contact, absolutely no sex, and no physical contact. The matter came to a hearing and a consultation was scheduled. By this time, Mel was very upset by Will's aloofness. He cooked and went down to his room. He was still preparing breakfast, but when the kids left, he just made his own cereal. One surprising discovery was that neither of them felt sexual attraction to anyone. Will was kind of dead in that sense. He hadn't met many women in his daily life, and those he saw did not interest him. Mel had moments where she thought about trying to win Will back completely, but she knew him and understood that she would only make the situation worse over time, as he seemed disgusted by even the thought of her touch. She gradually lost hope that the marriage could be saved. That's where things stood when they went to their first consultation appointment with Dr. Mary Stevens. Dr. Stevens was an attractive woman in her 50s. She asked them to write down in advance the basics of what happened and how they would like to move forward. Dr. Stevens was not one to beat around the bush. She began the session by simply stating, "Both of you are deeply depressed. Melody is losing hope that the marriage can be saved and begins to shift the blame. Will is tormented by the thought that he will never be able to satisfy his wife the way her lover can. The question is, what can be done?" Will said, "I think we need to be apart. Now I see her every day. It's torture for me." Mel looked at him. "We had good sex before, Robert, and even when I craved him, we still could." Mary asked, "But you understand that Will just doesn't want to be compared and lose in comparison?" Mel said, "Sex is sex. There have been maybe 3 times in our marriage where he hasn't satisfied me." Will said, "But not like Robert, right?" Mary and Will looked at Mel. She said, "The night with Robert was great. He had the huge advantage of being new and different. Now Will would have that. It's been so long." Will said, "Don't be mean. Why didn't you go to him?" Mel said, "I try not to think about that night because I feel sick. I feel nauseous and have to distract myself." Mary asked, "Did you see Robert after that?" "No. He's been to our office twice, but I don't keep in touch with him. I'm warned when he comes, and I try not to cross paths with him in the hallway," Mel replied. Mary asked, "Did you have any sexual desires other than for Robert?" "Not lately. At first I wanted Will. I wanted him to just take me, but now I know he won't do that, and I don't want anyone else. Now I don't even want him." Mary asked Will, "Why didn't you try to reconnect sexually?" "Because I see them together in my head. We are destroyed." Mary asked, "Are you attracted to other women?" "No. Even the blonde neighbor who was attractive before. Nothing. Just nothing." Over the weekend, Will drove to a rented cabin by a lake in West Virginia. He didn't take his computer, only a notepad. He had been having a creative block for the last few days. On Saturday morning, Will drove to Pittsburgh. He spent 8 hours there, mostly on foot. He took no photographs or notes. He just watched. He spent Sunday in the cabin. Then he called home and told Mel that he would stay a few more days to try to relax. On Monday, he went to Pittsburgh again. He spent 10 hours there making more observations. He returned home on Tuesday afternoon. The trip helped a little with his creative block. He had fresh ideas for his next thriller. He and Mel attended a second counseling session. Will came in a better mood. He connected this with the trip to the cabin. Mary suggested medication for depression, but Will just took a vacation for himself. At the end of the session, Mel felt a little encouraged by Will's improved mood, but she sensed an underlying tension that made her uneasy. At home, he had shoulder tics, and during the second session on Friday, Will went to the cabin again. By then, Mark had returned home to be with Mel. Will went to Pittsburgh again on Saturday and returned home on Tuesday. On Wednesday of that week, Mark went to a nature camp where Sherry was a counselor. Will was working in his office when someone knocked on the door. It was his blonde neighbor, Linda Miller. She had lived next door for 6 years and was divorced from her husband. She was 30 and beautiful, with a 7-year-old daughter named Velma, who was with her father for the summer holidays. Will was surprised by Linda's appearance. "Hi, Will. I thought maybe you could look at my kitchen sink. I have a wrench," Linda said. Linda was the opposite of Mel in many ways. She was blonde with light skin, curvy, and very beautiful. She divorced her husband 2 years ago. Over all these years, she had felt drawn to Will. He reminded her of her first boyfriend, and she liked smart guys. She saw the comings and goings from Will's house, particularly him entering and exiting through the basement door. Will was wearing his usual workout shorts and a t-shirt. He put on his sneakers and escorted Linda to her house around the corner. She was also wearing workout shorts and a t-shirt with flip-flops. Will easily unclogged the drain on her kitchen sink using her wrench and tape. She stood over him while he was under the sink. He could see her sexy legs all the way to the top. When Will finished installing the trap back, He slid out from under the sink. "I believe you told me that your father was a plumber when we first met," he said. Linda smiled. "I wanted to see you, on your back. I see you liked watching. I thought you might like it." Will noticed she was now barefoot. "I want it. I usually get what I want from guys. Come with me and take off your shorts." She turned around, pulled her shorts to the ground, and walked away from him, swaying her hips. Will stood up, dropped his shorts and boxers, took off his t-shirt, and followed her upstairs like a rat following the Pied Piper. When they arrived in her bedroom, she turned around and took off her t-shirt. Will later thought that he should have considered his own marital status, but at that moment, there was no such thought in his head. Afterward, Linda got dressed again. "I see you walking back and forth through the back door. I can see across the yards, and I saw the bed being delivered there. I wonder if it's comfortable." Will replied, "Yes, you'll have to try it." She frowned. "As you heard, I can be loud." "Yeah, I don't know if I'm ready to throw it in her face, but maybe I'd like to stay in touch." "You will, Will." He went back into his house through the back door and took a shower. Then he sat down and thought about it all. He was always aware of the mutual attraction between Linda and himself, but the juxtaposition of her obvious seductiveness and his problems with Mel was unsettling. He put these thoughts aside and got up to write until it was time to cook dinner. He prepared cutlets and salad for two. When Mel arrived, he lit the grill and said, "Dinner is in 20. Would you like something to drink?" "Sure. Maybe red." "You choose," Mel said. He poured her a mixed California wine. They had dinner on the patio. He asked her about work. She talked about the new project, nothing about Robert. She made it clear without being too obvious. "I'm working on a new thriller. The ideas came while I was at the cabin. Away from my problems." "Our problems," he said. "Tell me," she said. He gave her a brief explanation about the killer hiding in plain sight. He didn't go into detail about methods or other specifics. Mel helped him tidy up and clean. They finished their wine and each went to their rooms to sleep. The evening strengthened Will's thoughts about Linda. Mel didn't question his apparent change in mood. She also didn't mention divorce. A couple of times she glanced at Linda's house, but Linda was not on the street. In fact, Linda wasn't home either. She was on a date with a guy she considered a long-term project. He was wealthy, though short and a bit thick. But Horace was a pleasant man. Linda's divorce was due to her repeated infidelity. She had a great time with Will and was looking forward to continuing to see her neighbor, Mel. If she asked again over the next few days, Linda and Will had marathon sex every morning for about 3 hours. Linda found it exciting. Will was a little tired when he arrived for his third counseling session with Mary. Mel was already sitting in her chair. Will sat down. Mary and Mel looked at him without saying anything. Finally, he said, "I understand that you arranged this, Mel. Thank you very much." He wasn't being sarcastic. Mary asked, "What?" But Will was in no mood to be ambiguous. "You know what, Mary? Be honest." Mel said, "We both thought it would be good for you. It was, wasn't it?" Will said, "Absolutely. So good. I'll never forget this as long as I live." He looked at Mel. Anger flashed across her face. Will grinned. Mary said, "Don't be mean, Will. Understand that Mel made a sacrifice." He nodded. "I saw it. There's a big difference, though." Mel chimed in. "Yeah, you've done it every day this week. The difference is that I didn't want you to cheat, but you arranged it for me because you cheated." Mel was confused. "I didn't like it." "Well, was she better than me?" Will was smart enough to keep his mouth shut. He shrugged. Mary said, "Will, this shows how much Mel wants to move past what happened." Will nodded. "Yes, I can see it. Maybe it will work in a few weeks." He started giggling. Mel snorted. "I'll call her off." He smiled. "You can't, I'm winding her up." Mel sank into her chair. Then she stood up and said, "Okay, she gets the days and I get the nights. I need it." "Damn it, Will, you're beautiful and sexy. You can have anyone." Mel said, "I can, but I want you. I love you. I only want you." When they had calmed down, Mary said, "I'd like to schedule a session for both of you in about 2 weeks to see what happened." Mel and Will arrived home in their separate cars. It was Thursday afternoon. Will was going to a cabin for the weekend and had no intention of canceling those plans. He felt it was important to leave. He stayed there until Monday afternoon. After the failed consultation, during a weekend at the lake, Mel and Linda talked about Will at Linda's house. Mel said, "I think your involvement may now end." Linda smiled and said, "My boyfriend Horace is short and chubby but rich and sweet. Will is not short and chubby, and he has real talent, as you know. So, why should I leave? Because I want to try to stitch the marriage together, see if it lasts, and you're a complication." "I wasn't a complication when you asked." "No, it helped a lot, but you obviously got a lot out of it too. He's my husband, not yours. Maybe I could win him over." Mel's tone became dangerous. "You really don't want this," Linda said. "Oh, okay, can we split it up over time? I won't try to keep him, but I'd like to finish it gradually." Mel didn't believe it. "You can get any guy you want." Linda responded, "So can you. I'll take care of Will for you." Mel thought about it. "I want my family back." Linda sighed. "Okay, I want Monday night all night, then I'll stop. I'll knock on his door after dinner. Tuesday you can knock." Mel agreed. When they parted, she said, "Just don't get pregnant." Linda said, "Another guy's a backup option, but I won't." Will returned home on Monday afternoon. He was able to write a lot on Sunday at the cabin. That weekend, he made an offer to buy the place. He ordered pizza for dinner that night. Mel was kind of depressed, so he left it like that and went downstairs. At 11 in the evening, there was a quiet knock on his basement door. It was Linda. "This is our last time all night long. Let's have fun." She was wearing a short chemise dress and nothing else. They really had fun, loudly so Mel could hear. Will thought it was only fair. After that night, Linda moved on to other things. Her daughter was returning home, and she needed to pay more attention to Horace. On Tuesday, Will made a nice pasta dish and tomato salad for two. He knew Mel would be looking for something more than just dinner. He decided not to resist. Between them, they were as balanced as possible while maintaining their marriage. He decided it was best for everyone. By that evening, he invited Mel down. She stayed all night. She woke Will at 5:30 in the morning. Then she got hungry, and he prepared breakfast. As they ate, Mel asked, "Are we okay?" "We'll never be equals. You threw me a bone, and I threw it back, but it was you. I would never approve of what you did. Still, it was nice of you." He said, "I have to work. I'm going to the cabin this Thursday. I have a separate project there, and I need space. I made an offer to buy it. If I buy it, I'll take you there." Mel said, "I never asked much about it. Either I get it or I don't. I'll find out soon enough." Will was very productive over the weekend. His plans and plots for the new thriller worked well. He also made a deal to buy a cabin. He returned home on Monday morning. He and Mel slept in their marital bed all week. Sleep was only a secondary consideration for her. She felt like she had fallen behind sexually and needed to catch up. Her efforts were admirable, Will thought. On Thursday, when Mel got home from work, she said, "Will, I have to tell you something. Robert seems to have disappeared. On Sunday, he had dinner at a restaurant he frequents. He left there after a few drinks. He didn't make it to his apartment 6 blocks away. That's what Abe told me. The search began. Now the police are looking for him." Will listened carefully and fell silent. "I'm sure he'll show up somewhere. Maybe he's got a new crush. Or maybe he's gotten involved with the wrong woman," Mel said, looking at Will for a long time. "No, I didn't mean you," Will replied. Though it took about a year, Mel and Will eventually got back on track. It was difficult at first, but they worked hard, both individually and with Mary. They spent almost every weekend at the cabin. The bed there got so worn out it needed replacing. In the end, they only had each other as an option. After a year of uncertainty, they seemed to be okay. Will was always on guard, and Mel knew it. Even a year later, Robert was never found. The longer he was missing, the more everyone believed he had met with an accident. His business accounts were in order, and there was no apparent reason for his voluntary disappearance. However, he had been involved in 2 deals with dubious characters. One deal fell through and money was lost. The authorities focused on this and also questioned Gloria's husband. There were no arrests. Nobody asked Will anything. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like.